Started. On today's agenda, we are first going to go over the government review, big day today, and we'll hear more about that shortly. And then after our government review, we'll talk about possible
Please.
Trisha fell off.
Oh. I was wondering if it was just me or.
All right, Chris, take it away.
Okay, sure. It's Chris Gray here. Obviously, a lot on the agenda today, and I apologize. I can only be on for about till 25 after, so I'll try to go through some of the information quickly. And many of us have been watching what's been going on with the government announcements today, but also, so I'll talk briefly about the rent relief that was announced today. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program will open up on Monday, so you can apply for the wage subsidy program on Monday. So just wanted to mention that as well. Back to the rent relief that was announced today, and frankly, some of you may have more questions than we have answers right now. I have not seen a deep dive technical brief that they usually put out shortly after the announcement, but the Prime Minister did announce today during his daily briefing that they have entered into a partnership with the provinces and territories to actually implement the commercial rent relief assistance program. So they will, the government, both the provincial and the federal government, will cover 75% of the recent agreement to lower the rents by 75% for small and medium-sized businesses for the months of April, May, and June. So the governments combined will cover the 50% of the reduction. 25% will be picked up by the small business, and the other 25% will be incurred by the landlord. The program that they announced today is eligible businesses are those paying less than $50,000 a month in rent. Still waiting again on some more details. I believe that's by business and not by location. And then other news, the Prime Minister noted that other larger businesses that go above that threshold, they are planning something. He alluded to it, but he didn't say exactly what that program would entail. So the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation will administer the program, and it's expected that this will be operational by the middle of May. The program, so probably very similar. You'll have to go on and apply and so on. So that is it in a nutshell. Others like Betsy, I know you were watching it as well. I don't know if you had anything to add or anyone had any comments or questions beyond that. And I did circulate a brief. I don't know if it got out to the members yet, but there is more information available, like the full press release from the Prime Minister's office that came out. So with that, I'll stop, and maybe there's questions or comments.
A couple of things I can add in there, Chris. One was that it is being administered through CMHC, so it's up to the landlords to go through the process, and then they provide the benefits. So that, I think, is key for everyone to make sure that they're communicating with landlords as quickly as possible in order to make sure that happens. And if the landlords don't, I mean, they have to submit for that in order for it to happen. And then the other, it's just a really small little point, but the other point that they made was that of the government percentages, the government is providing 50%, and of that 75% is the federal government and 25% is the individual province. But every province has signed on to add that provincial 25%.
I thought it was 75%. I thought it was 50% they were providing, and
the government is providing 50%.
Yeah.
Of that 50%, 75% of that is federal and 25% of that is provincial, just from a funding perspective. But that all provinces, the important thing I think that they had their ducks in a row today to announce was that every province has signed on. So everybody's on the same page. It doesn't matter what province you're coming from.
So overall, it's great news. It's very good. It's just, it's impressive, frankly. I think that the government is doing this, taking the action. Obviously, the key is in the implementation of it, and but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I guess one of the things we'll have to figure out is what happens past June.
And that was a question I saw during the ministers' discussion. That was a question that they had as well, and they essentially said, we're doing what we can until June right now, and we'll see what we can do after that. Essentially, they're sort of playing it by ear, I think, but that's what I heard.
I have a question. It's Angela. I have somebody subleasing, like a physiotherapist, leasing an office. Do you think it's covered under that too?
Like, do I think that that person would
well,
be?
yeah, that I can apply essentially because I'm not charging him any rent right at this moment. But can I apply for the 50% then?
That's a good question. I can take that away.
I would assume that if your lease is, if you're the one on the lease with the landlord, that you can apply for it, and then filter through to your sublease would be my assumption, but definitely something to follow up on.
Great, thank you.
Tricia?
Something I do want to mention is, first of all, hi everyone. Betsy, we do want to get some messaging out on behalf of the industry, and I was wondering if you had ideas that you can share with everyone about the style of messaging that you see that would be best at this time right now.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is a statement on behalf of the industry, just saying, reflecting today's announcement that this is good progress from the government, that the industry has been working on lobbying the government in order to get some of this in place. So I think a statement that gets issued to key media across the country should go a long way to make sure that the voices are heard that way. And then I also think that a variation of said statement should probably go out on social media as well, including Twitter and LinkedIn pages, etc. And if other members can share, I think that would be really, really key. Once it's there and it's confirmed, and then we can get that out there. And I don't know how often you guys are doing newsletters to all of the members, but I think a newsletter out to everyone, that may be better to share maybe on a Monday, and Chris and I and you guys can work together on some Q&As that are probably going to come up over the next couple of days, just like that question on subleases, etc. So you can send that out perhaps to members. I would suggest though that it's not a thanks, this is really great and we appreciate it. This is a great first step, and now there's lots more to do, but this is a really encouraging step from the government, and now together with landlords we need to make sure that this gets implemented as quickly as possible so that the tenants are receiving the benefits as quickly as they possibly can.
Just Betsy, do you think timing on that, should we put out a statement today, or
I would love to if we can. Yeah. I've been working away on just pulling all the little bits and pieces together that we got from the various statements today. So I'll get it to you guys as soon as we can.
That's something we should also filter in directly to the minister's office. that we have been talking to, so they know are scratching their back, so to speak.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I sent out both on LinkedIn and Facebook just this morning a recap of what was announced. So in case anybody wants to repost that, that's available just as a quick kind of this is what was announced, but I did not say anything else about that, just to keep people informed and keep our members informed about the information that's out. But I think it's great to get the statement out, and then we can definitely do the bigger mail out on Monday.
It's Dave Hardy. It would also probably not be a bad time to feather in a little bit about what's happened in British Columbia with property taxes being abated for the 25% to sort of get it on everybody's radar. We want to first congratulate the government on doing this, and we also want to point out or congratulate the province of BC and also addressing the property tax issue, as this is a significant expense. And in some cases, a bigger expense for some fitness operators than even their rent. And they agreed to abate 25% of it for the 2020 year.
Have they agreed already to it, or it was the last I heard it was only discussed?
I thought they'd agreed, but maybe someone could do some research on that and find out.
Yeah, the only thing I know is that property tax has originally been deferred to September 2nd, and it's now October, but I'm not sure if it's the end of October or the start of October, so it's at least another month's deferral. So that is clear.
Well, Tricia, maybe you could do a little research on that. If it actually has been announced, that would be a great thing to sort of put a little pressure on all the other provinces to start addressing it. If it hasn't been announced yet, maybe we'll leave it off until it is announced.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. And if Carl, Curtis, you're both from BC as well, have you heard anything about that?
Carl here. I don't know that I don't remember hearing that it was approved. We haven't heard of an application process or anything at this point, but worth researching if Dave is saying it has been, for sure.
Yeah, same as myself, and I'll look into it with our team. I'm not aware of it though. So
sorry, I got in a little bit late. I wanted to ask, this is Bilal from Motion Fitness of Saskatchewan. So is it rent, or is it rent and cam cost or op cost? Did anyone elaborate on that?
Sorry, what was this? Rent or which? Sorry. Oh, you went off.
Sorry, my question was, is it pure rent, or the relief would be $50,000 and below, including rent and operational cost or cam cost, or additional rent, some leases call it. Was there any clarity on that, or no?
As far as I know, there's not any clarity on that, Bilal, right now. It said $50,000 per month in rent. So we'll have to wait and see if there's any more detail on that on the technical briefing that they put out. But as far as I know, it's just on the rent.
Okay, so not. And then what about if you're paying more than 50? I did hear that there'll be an announcement coming soon, or some sort of a program. Did the briefing elaborate on that at all, or a timeline on that, or no? Because we have clubs that pay more than 50,000 in rent.
Yeah, I have no further information on that at this time. So we'll have to wait and see and ask those questions in the coming days.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, do we have any more questions on this, or we can move on to the next item on the agenda here? All right, so the next thing we want to discuss is possible tax credits, and this being a time to bring that up. Scott, do you want to take it from here when it comes to tax credits? Oh, and then in the chat box, just before we do that, I see that Graham has sent a link about the BC property tax, so we can just take a look at that. And while we do that, Scott, you can go over fitness taxes.
Yeah. So just as our association, as we partnered with Chris and his group, continue to network and create relationships, there's an opportunity, I believe, to actually start the conversation again regarding tax credits, fitness tax credits, specifically as we, as an industry, get ready to reopen. So I'd like to start that conversation with our connection with Minister of Small Business. And again, looking at the angle of getting consumer behavior to support health. So it's well documented, the benefits of exercise, and we want to focus on the fact that people are looking to be proactive regarding their health, but then also supporting the local business, and a tax credit actually fills both of those functions. So we wanted to kind of pivot our lobbying now that we have some potential solutions for rent to focus on tax credits. So wanted to get back from this group if that was a good use of time and energy and funds. So throwing it out there.
Carl here in BC. I just want to confirm that this wouldn't, like, are we still pursuing the relief? I know Justin said that there'll be more announcements coming, but are we still pursuing relief for businesses that do have rent costs higher than 50,000 plus?
I'll let Chris speak to that, but apparently there's more to come. So yes, we would still, as an industry, be looking at those options and lobbying for those options. And that's to supposedly coming out next week. I'm thinking in terms of the tax credits more, in the next few weeks, month, as the industry gets ready to reopen.
Yeah, I'll just say that, Scott, you kind of just nailed it right there. I mean, we do expect more on the over 50,000 a month. So we will be communicating with government, but also obviously filtering down to your members as well about that, and providing that in as timely as we can. And we've been going back and forth on the tax credit issue. And I think it is, I totally agree with you, in the coming weeks, as we start to emerge from where we are, and we are already seeing some provinces with a plan to open up, and Saskatchewan has a plan, a 3 or 4 tier plan, and gyms are in there as well, I believe in tier 3. So it's definitely something that at some point we can turn to and start to put, as you said, we've built these relationships now. The Fitness Industry Council has built these relationships. So I think that's something that we can definitely continue to foster and get out there. Because as you said, it kind of checks 2 boxes for the government.
I concur.
I think it's good to try and strike while the iron is hot, I guess I'll say, or start to, you just don't want to be left behind. And I think that as the government continues to roll out stimulus packages, they will continue to turn to try and helping Joe Canadian, so to speak, and how do we get you out of your house and more healthy. And I think it's something traditionally, obviously, the Liberals have shied away from, but we're in obviously unprecedented times for sure.
Okay.
Great. I think that might be a great segue to go into our next discussion, which is about reopening plans.
Yeah, so we're fortunate to be invited to the Global Federations call with URSA, where we get to hear, how our partners globally are thinking of reopening, and there's lots of great ideas. Obviously, we have connections in this group with facilities that are operating in the US, and I'm sure we're all very interested to see what happens this weekend in Georgia. And then obviously with our provincial council and board members, feet on the ground in the different provinces. So what we are looking at doing is really compiling best practices and creating a code of conduct. So, statement that clubs and facilities that are part of our group would adhere to, and that code of conduct would be based on the best practices that we select from around the world and in our own nation. So that's kind of the concept. Looking for any feedback or thoughts on creating that document and proudly deploying it.
We are planning, like Angela again in Vancouver. I'm planning to have a code of conduct for staff and clients, and that code of conduct will, once we have a reopening date, and just for the fun of it, let's say June 1st, which will go out the week before, and the code of conduct will be partially, at least the gist of it will be in the email to our clients, and it will be promptly displayed as well in the studio. And I potentially have clients, because we have a number of very elderly clients who do come sniffling and coughing around. So I may even ask them to sign it. So I will say what we will be doing for them to come back so they can feel safe, like enhanced cleaning techniques and whatever. So I will state that in the email. I'm now when we announce that we reopen. I also will say that our staff is following a code of conduct, and it will be displayed in the studio. And I hope, because we will be dealing with a lot of fear of clients and members to come back, and we have to, and I feel we have to be seen that we take those fears serious, and that we do all to alleviate those.
Yeah, and that's great insight, Angela, and that's the purpose of a code of conduct. So what we're looking for is, do we want to draft something for Fitness Industry Council Canada and actually, with Betsy's help, actually create a campaign to educate the public that facilities are adhering to these standards, because there will be anxiety for people to show up to a facility again, no doubt about it.
We have to watch out to make it an industry-wide guideline. Out of the simple reason, there's different labor standards acts and human rights act in different provinces, and so it can only be a sort of a general guideline, and each province may have to do their own code of or add or alter the general statement. I talked with my labor lawyer already about it, and she said, before you publish anything, please do run it by me. So, and she happens to chair the Human Rights Council at the tribunal here in BC. So I really going to run it by her before I publish anything to that degree.
Absolutely. And Jeff brought up a good comment in the chat as well. So our code of conduct would have to be broad enough to apply to everybody, and but also specific enough to allay fears if we wanted to do this and actually create a campaign around it. So it might be better if it's done at your local level or your business level, but the thought is that we would create that code potentially and broadcast it in a campaign, an organized campaign.
Carl here in BC. I think it would be good practice to probably mirror the language that our health authorities are using as well. One of the documents we've been looking at is the guidance to retail food and grocery stores that the BC Minister of Health has put out. It's on their website, and I think it's going to be important for us to mirror the statements. You know, obviously make it specific to our industry, because if we can get if we can have advocates from the health ministries as well as our members, we're going to win. And I think using that same language would be important in doing so. There's a lot of specific physical distancing standards, hygiene standards, as well as a calculation of which is one of the things we were looking for. It's great. There's a calculation, at least in BC, for the maximum number of people per square meter in facilities. So if we come out and we mirror a lot of the rules and languages that are already out there for big box stores in different industries, I think we will win at this.
There's another, this is Mario here in Toronto. URSA put out a really great document along these lines. They call it 18 questions for operators to consider when planning how and when to open. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's quite useful. I think it's quite handy. One of the things I find that I've been challenged with my board is trying to project what our revenues are going to look like when we reopen under these conditions. And so I'm finding it quite challenging. So any kind of insight or any kind of thoughts from everybody here, I think would be really useful. Because obviously we're all going to be quite concerned about our revenues, considering we've been at essentially zero for a while now. But again, referring back to this document, I think it's a nice template that we could use for developing some kind of a code, or I mean, lift it directly. I think it's quite useful. Has anybody else seen it?
No.
Yes, it came out 2 days ago.
Yeah. I'm finding it quite helpful in putting together my plan. It just gives me some direction to work with. So I definitely encourage everybody else to have a look if you can.
I see Curtis just posted it in the group chat, so you can take a look. And then after the meeting, I will send it out as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we opened in Georgia today, and we have given guidance to our franchisees. It is kind of that delicate line, not to be too harsh and too scary, but also make sure that we're keeping everyone safe as well. So it is important that we have that fine line. We've revised a member letter a few times, trying to make sure we're in that happy medium.
Has anyone taken a stab at projections, revenue projections after the opening, considering we're dealing with, 50% capacity or whatever that is, just any kind of projection at all?
Some of the numbers I've heard floating around through talking with some of the representatives from URSA is looking at a 50% won't return to the gym out of fear.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Has anybody looked at their capacities of what they're thinking they're going to open with, assuming we go with that 50% number? I know for example, in my facility, I just put caution tape around every other machine to enforce that physical distancing. So we're working kind of that number. Is anyone else working with a different projection, like 30%, 40%, anything like that? I'm just curious.
I can jump in here. This is Curtis from Vancouver, Canada. We own a chain of personal training studios, so it's not a big box volume-based membership gym. We took a lot of our services online. So in 3 weeks, we have taken about 40% of our business online, which obviously helped us currently right now. But from an opening perspective, we've just spent the last week designing our spaces. Usually our spaces are around 6,000 to 7,000 square feet, designing our spaces for a flow of traffic, as well as almost pod scenarios where we're going to tape off areas where we'll have limitations around approximately 10 to 12 pods in each one of our locations at a time. Because we're strictly one-on-one and two-on-one training, we have obviously we can control the flow of traffic a little bit better, but we're anticipating that we will maintain about 30% or 35% online and probably about 40% capacity when we open. That's what we're projecting.
Thank you. That's useful. Has anyone else looked at the actual methods? I know that the Singaporean experience and the experience over in Asia has showed us some methods of testing and questioning members, doing it in phases. Anyone else considered or explored anything like that? Because right now, that's what seems to be the most effective strategy moving forward. Any thoughts or concerns about that?
I did get a no-touch thermostat, thermometer. Just, I don't know if we need it, but I have two healthcare providers as well using our facility, a chiropractor and a physiotherapist. And while I do believe that it's also a personal, just a small personal training studio, I do believe that my clients will be okay with being told not to come in if they are not feeling well. I don't know about the patients of those two guys because a dislocated shoulder will need physio. So they may come in with a cold, but I'm not entirely certain. And that is why I had asked our lawyer as well to look into that, how I can protect the studio compared to when these people come in. So I'm not sure how we're going to handle that. I just have the thermometer for the time being. We are considering having masks there for potential, like more the patients than the clients to wear a mask when they're being treated. But again, I'm just waiting for what guidelines come from our province and from what you are going to dig up.
I suspect that'll be the case. We'll be getting, all of us will be waiting for guidelines from our various health authorities to give us some kind of direction on this, because right now I think we're just kind of spitballing and throwing ideas and stuff. But that was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Carl's idea is really well done when it comes to looking at mirroring the language from health ministers. And Scott also agrees his connection's not so well, but I think that's what we should all look at doing, seeing what the grocery stores and everyone is stating at the moment, and then following similar language when we are putting our own documents together.
I was just wondering, what's the calculation that's being used in BC that was referenced to earlier? I put it in the comment as well, just to have an idea. It's Bilal here from Saskatchewan.
So here we have, it's critical to evaluate how many people can reasonably be in a store and easily practice physical distancing 2 meters apart. It's strongly recommended that food, retail, and grocery store operators have 5 meters squared of encumbered retail floor space per person, i.e. 5 meters squared per person. This incumbent space would be retail floor space minus floor space used for fittings, displays, etc. So consider maybe some of our equipment or facilities. So take, for example, a store with 200 meters squared of retail floor space with 70 meters squared of fittings and displays. The store has 200 meters minus 70 meters squared. That equals 130 meters squared of unencumbered floor space. For customers, maximum number of people allowed in the store to support physical distancing would be 130 meters squared divided by 5 meters squared per person equals 26 people. So that's on the BC Centre for Disease Control, BC Ministry of Health guidelines here. I'm not an ace at copying and pasting links here, but there you go.
Tricia, could you post that link or that document somehow? Yeah, please.
This isn't good enough for you, huh? Take a picture. Take a picture.
Does it count counting locker rooms and all this?
Well, I think that's where we need to create those rules ourselves before allowing the ministry to create them for us, right? So if we get ahead of that.
Sorry, appreciate. Go ahead.
Yeah, in Georgia, we actually ask our members to change before or after, they come to the club and bring as limited amount of items into the club as possible. So we've tried to, in the U.S., the only guidelines we have is maintain social distancing and excellent cleaning protocols. It doesn't really indicate on the larger document, does that include face mask for gyms or business type? So we're trying to provide, our franchisees that guidance on what are we going to do, as you said, code of conduct across the brand.
I was thinking myself to basically ask clients that they obviously are welcome to use shower facilities if need be, but for the time being and for the foreseeable future, if they could not use the facility to shower and spend a lot of time in the steam.
So there was actually a global federations call yesterday with URSA, and they did mention in Europe that they are closing all the locker rooms, and people who are coming to the gyms, they are to wear what they're going to wear to the gym, and leave what they're wearing. So that area is completely locked down because there's a lot of exchange in what you touch in there. And then there was another suggestion that maybe people can just store things in the locker room, but then that brings up the fact that they need to make sure that that area is constantly sanitized. So for the moment, that is kind of like a forbidden area. Once we can get through it a little bit better, that might be open and more flexible to use, but at the moment, that's the kind of outlook.
It would definitely significantly increase your sanitizing area if you open change rooms as well and the time. And I suspect that time you'd better spend sanitizing the actual gym area, the actual workout area, and cleaning it. So that would be my recommendation there, the suggestion.
Yeah, there was some guidelines about that literally you'd have to have like one in, one out of the change room, and then there'd have to be a sanitization to happen afterwards. So just the feasibility of it isn't that great. I think you can look at, there's a few different things that have come out, both from Georgia and on the US side, and the Saskatchewan guidelines for opening, I think, are really interesting indicators as well, where gyms are on the third phase. And in that phase, you have a limit, I believe, of either 15 or 30 people at once in a space as a crowd gathering. And it's only conditional on there being testing and contact tracing, like at full capacity. So those are a few things that like would correlate between how and when gyms could open, just in terms of timeline, that go along, at least here in Canada. Saskatchewan, I think, taking the lead on that is a pretty good indicator. And Ontario is going to be coming out with some guidelines on phase reopening sometime next week. So I think a lot of it's going to kind of come down to what is dictated from that standpoint. Because even if you have a big facility, you can't have more than 30 people in there, even with that square footage calculation that Carl mentioned. So, some of it's just going to come, I think, given, and then we're going to have to adjust based off of that and just realize that the capacity is going to be limited based off of that.
We have to take into account that if you have the washrooms in the locker room, washrooms have to be accessible to anybody. You can't refuse to have let somebody go in there to use the washroom. That will be under BC's Human Rights Act, at least, not permissible. So I probably can basically seal the showers and say, hey, you can't use those. But the rest you will have to keep open, at least depending. I mean, we have one accessible washroom, like the handicap washroom. I can't, and I could have certainly a designated area where people can leave their gym bag or whatever their personal belongings, and then not open the locker rooms. But I'm not sure if we can get, depending on how many people you have, I'm not sure if that is going to be enough. So we will have to look at that as well.
Great. And I see that Paula just added a link to the so for some guidelines for locker rooms and employees, so we can check that out. And Saskatchewan, Natalie is asking for the link to Saskatchewan guidelines, so I will have that sent out to everyone as well. And then on that note, Natalie, would you mind stepping in to discuss Quebec?
Yes, la belle province. So we've been working quite hard. So what the Quebec clubs are doing, led by our friends at Énergie Cardio and Econo Fitness, is pulling together a coalition. We started with every club that had, or fitness centers that had at least 10 locations in Quebec, and we've got almost everybody in that one. Just one of them said no. And then we heard of a coalition that was put together for, I think they start as small as personal training studios, going as large as CrossFit studios. They're almost at 200 of them. And then there was another one of independent studios, and we're all pulling everybody together as much as possible, because to Nick's point about when the government makes decisions, they'll say things like 15 to 30 people, which makes sense for some of us, is too much for some of us, and not enough for others. And so we would like to take the initiative by letting the government know that we will absolutely follow the guidelines. And I know that Evelyn and Renaud in particular have looked deeply into everything that needs to be done in that sense, but then provide them with our reopening protocols that make sense for as many different styles of fitness centers as possible. I know that sounds a little bit utopic, but we're going to do our best and see if we can get everybody included in that, so that one, we might be able to influence the phase and during which the fitness clubs can open versus just told by the government, and two, the manner in which we're doing it. So we just confirmed the lobby firm today. The lobby firm has already been working with the provincial Minister of Health and Finance Minister to start to open up the conversation, because in Quebec, the reopening plan will be communicated next week by the provincial government. And the events industry has come together and submitted a plan. The hairdressing industry has come together and submitted a plan. And we didn't want to be left out, because the concern is that if we didn't have a plan together, we were worried we were going to be last. We're not saying we need to be first, but we really want to demonstrate that we have our ducks in a row and are ready to go for when the government puts it in. And so we're coming together as much as possible to talk about the reopening protocols with the lobby firm, rent abatement, which now we'll talk to the lobby firm to see if that's still necessary, or if it's like, seems like by the time next week we're good to go with that. And then maybe some sort of other subsidy to essentially allow our industry to survive the next 2 years versus be incredibly impacted by that. So that's where we are now. We're talking the first call where the, I suppose, spokespeople of all of these coalitions are coming together is Monday afternoon, and the lobby firm was putting in today our number with the provincial government to make sure that we were at least on the docket and part of the conversation moving forward before the provincial government put out their plan, because we know how to run our businesses better than they do. They know what the guidelines are. We can probably be the best people to put those two together as safely and effectively as possible. And obviously, we'll let you guys know. So I'll read the Saskatchewan ones. I've got the links open for everything now, but we will let you all know where that goes as it goes moving forward in terms of what we can put together. And as soon as we know anything, we'll definitely let you know. But the next, I'm assuming 10 days tops, will be quite heavy in terms of taking the initiative when it comes to this.
Great, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right. So now we will just open it up to any comments or questions that we have in general with any of the discussions that we've had so far, or if there's any topics that you'd like to bring up that you'd want to discuss either now or put on the docket for next week, we can go over those.
I have one comment, and it's Angela again. If you go with the 75% wage subsidy, a lot of employees are also qualifying for a complete 100% reduction in deductions in CCP and EI for, as far as I understand, for 2 months. So that was very vague out of a statement, and my accountant hadn't got all the details either, and she has still not all the details on how this money is supposed to come back. It is supposed to come back in form of a refund, but nothing clearer on that. If somebody knows more or could find out, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. Betsy, do you know anything further on that?
I would think that's more on Chris's lines from a government perspective. I don't know anything on that. What I did hear today as well, though, was there was a question around the fact that the program that they announced today won't be available until mid-May, and the concerns of fitness studios and all retail being able to pay up until then. And what they did recommend was they referenced the previous CEBA piece of the $40,000 loan and grant. And if you can get that in play, then that will basically, that $10,000 that they're guaranteeing, that'll be a free, that'll be a grant versus a loan, will probably cover most people's rent for that time being that you've missed. So that's just something to keep in mind if that hasn't been done yet, to sort of build that time frame in between, because you'll probably be waiting till at least mid-May, if not early June, to get the April-May timeframe covered.
Great, thank you. And then that's something we can also take to Chris, who has left the call, but we'll make sure that he knows what the questions are.
Yep.
Any other comments for today? Well, I think the next steps forward, let's take a look at monitoring what the government is coming up with when it comes to the rent relief, and that we can share that around. And also, if everyone can kind of take a look at what your provinces are doing for reopenings, as well as kind of what the restrictions are when it comes to people in places. And then what we can do is kind of gather that information, and then we can share that for next week. And then next week we will gather again, same time, same place.
All right. Well, thank you, Tricia. Thank you, everyone.